So I wanted to make a video today going over the abstract that's in front of us here. I've been wanting to make a video like this going over different abstracts of different papers I find interesting like once a week, but last few weeks have been pretty hectic. I got sick for a week, then we had Christmas and all that fun stuff, so really wanted to get this one out, at least getting another one out before the end of the year. It's the 29th right now as I'm making this, and so I'm thinking of probably just doing a little bit more of a unedited, just here it is, taking a look, reading through it for the first time with you guys, just seeing what we can find about it. So the paper I chose is the sex difference on one test of spatial visualization, a non-trivial difference. So first, as before we dive in, talking about my thought process of why I kind of chose this one or was kind of looking into this kind of stuff. I don't know what spurned it, but recently I've been asking a lot of my friends about how they think, because I think it's pretty interesting learning how we think. When I say think, I mean, say for example, if I ask you to picture an apple, what do you see? Do you see anything in your mind? Do you see the word spelled out, apple? Do you see a line drawing of an apple? Do you see a very colorful, realistic apple? Do you see like a cartoonish apple? Are you able to change how you view that apple? Can you rotate that apple? Can you move it? Can you set it on a desk? And so there's a lot of differences in how we think, how we visualize, if we're able to visualize, or even if we have inner dialogues or not. I myself have an inner dialogue, so just thinking, my thoughts are words, they're dialogues, they're me speaking to myself, and I can have other people there as well in my mind that I'm talking with, or like having debates with, or arguing with, or like visualizing like future situations that might happen, like what I might say, and like actually go through the process of saying that and like being responded to. There's a lot of people, like my mom, she doesn't have an inner dialogue, so it's just kind of, well, I can't imagine that because I have one, but I would imagine just kind of just silence. So like, I don't know, it's weird. It's hard for me as someone with an inner dialogue to comprehend what that's like. Just like the other way around, someone without an inner dialogue would probably have a hard time comprehending what it means to have one. So kind of I was just like looking into it because I noticed there were some differences when I would ask my friends about like, hey, how do they think? There's some differences between women and men. The men seem to be much stronger in the visualization of objects and things, whereas the women were more not so much visualizing, but more like, oh, they would see words of the object rather than a visualization of the object itself. So I was kind of just looking into seeing if there's any data out there to support it, and looking for like ways of thinking or how the sex differences might be in ways of thinking. I couldn't find too much, but there's a lot of looking at like the paper I found, the sex difference on spatial visualization. And spatial visualization is kind of, I guess, a way of approaching like how someone thinks, is their ability to spatially visualize things in their mind. So let's take a look at this. This paper is by Barbara Sanders, Mary P. Suarez, and Jean M. Daquille. Sorry, I am terrible at pronunciation of names and words, so I probably slaughtered that pretty bad. But they're out of the University of Connecticut, it looks like. And this paper was published, let's see. So a while ago. So this paper was published back in August of 1982. Wow. So this is a pretty old paper we're taking a look at. So here we go. So Plowman and Fox conclusion that sex differences in cognition account for very little of the total variability is challenged by demonstrating that, on a complex test of spatial visualization, the difference between males and females accounts for a quite substantial portion of the variability of the test scores. Cool. So this is kind of the thesis of the paper, of what they're testing. It's like, hey, there's this claim by some other scientists, Plowman and Falk, that sex difference in cognition accounts for very little of total variability in sex difference. And so what they're trying to say, or what they're challenging here, is like, hey, we're going to look at a complex test of spatial visualization, and we're going to find like there's actually a pretty big difference between the cognition of males and females, and that this spatial visualization accounts for the majority of that difference. Cool. So let's keep going. So two measures of spatial visualization, the ETS card rotations test and the Shepard-Metzler mental rotations test, were administered to a large sample of college students. The card rotations test requires identification of fairly simple abstract forms after rotation within the plane. The mental rotations test requires identification of representations of more complex three-dimensional figures after rotation in three-dimensional space. Cool, so they're telling us now their methods, what they're doing, what were the tests that they're using. So like they said, they have two measures of spatial visualization. The ETS card rotations, they kind of explain what the card rotation test requires. It's identification of fairly simple abstract forms after rotation within the plane. Cool. As well as the Shepard-Metzler mental rotation test. And they explain that as well, that it requires identification of representations of more complex three-dimensional figures after rotation in a three-dimensional space. So they're trying to, so they chose these two tests, one that's a two-dimensional plane rotation and another that's a three-dimensional plane rotation, in order to help bolster their claim that there's a really big difference between males and females when it comes to spatial visualization. So let's keep going. Males scored significantly higher than females on both tests. Sex accounted for only 2% of the variance on the card rotation test, but 16% of the variance on the mental rotations test. Comparable sex differences on the Shepard-Metzler mental rotations test have also been found by other investigators. Cool. So this is kind of the last part of their abstract, is their results. Like, this is what we found. This is so they get into a bit more details for the ETS card rotations test. There is a lot smaller of a variance, only 2%, so not super big. But on the 3D, the Shepard-Metzler mental rotations test, there was a 16% of the variance was accounted for by gender, and that is quite a lot. And they say it's comparable to sex differences in that test found by other investigators. Cool. So basically they're saying, hey, our thesis was correct, and it also lines up with what other investigators have also found. So this seems more like a project that was just adding to data that already existed, that's comparable by other investigators. So other scientists have already been out there, been doing this, been finding these findings and been like presenting them like, hey, there's a sex difference in these rotations, especially this Shepard-Metzler mental rotation test. And this paper, the experiments that were done, supports those past findings. Yeah, I just thought it was a cool article to go through. Interesting, I guess, findings that there is a difference in spatial visualization between males and females, and kind of applying that to what I was talking about earlier with ways of thinking kind of lines up with what I've found so far, and just talking with my friends about, hey, how do you think, are you like using the apple example? If I say think of an apple, like what goes on in your head. Are you seeing an apple? Are you just seeing words written out of apple, etc.? So that might be a fun thing to do with your friends as well, to spark a good, healthy discussion about how they think, how you think. Are you able to spatially visualize in your mind different objects, or are you seeing them as words written down? Do you have an inner monologue for your thoughts, or are you completely silent and more abstract? I think those are very interesting and fun conversations that can be had with your friends. But hey, thanks for watching this video. I hope you appreciate it. This is a lot less editing done in this one. I don't know if I'll edit it at all. I might just throw it all together with all my different cuts and like repeats, but I'll probably cut some of those out to keep the flow going of the video. But I'll try to keep the edits to a minimum, keep this more of like a live, like, hey, we're just going through this first time together, just talking, rambling. But I hope you enjoyed it. Please give a like and subscribe if you do. Like I said, I want to try and get like one of these out a week, just going over different abstracts. So if you have like a paper you want me to read that you find interesting, please share it in the comments below. I'd love to take a look at it and maybe do it as a video as well. But thanks.